The clock is an important part of our meeting. It's been ticking ever since I was brought here as a baby. And it just seems like it tells you that everything's going to be okay. And it's kind of a confessional clock. When you're younger, you never did anything really bad. But when it ticked, it got louder and louder, and you say, I'll never do that again. And then you relax and realize that things were going to be better.
For over 200 years, the white brick meeting house has stood at the corner of 4th and High Street in the town of Waynesville, Ohio, overlooking the Little Miami River. It sits in the heart of a historic district that has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is the oldest place of worship in continuous use west of the Allegheny Mountains. Every Sunday, friends gather for meeting for worship, as they have done for 200 years. In their time, the Quakers of Waynesville have left an indelible impact upon the community, and their impact is recorded not only in the buildings of the historic district that exists today, but in the faith and spirit of those who still call the Quaker Historic District a place to come together. The story of the Miami Monthly Meeting begins just outside what is now Newberry, South Carolina, near the Bush River. There, Quakers migrating south in the mid-1700s had established the Bush River Meeting. It was a well-attended meeting with over 400 members, and the Quakers were prospering. However, a darkness lurked on the edge of their prosperity. Slavery was in full force as an economic institution, and many Quakers came to take great issue with what was to them a clear-cut violation of their testimony of human equality, so they began to turn their sights elsewhere.
As a protest against slavery, they were looking for a place to move to where there would not be slavery.
The idea, of course, the Northwest Territory by contract was a free territory, as we all know. And the Quakers wanted to get away from slavery and the results of slavery.
The Northwest Territory loomed large to the north, a free land which slavery could never and would never touch. In 1798, two men set out from Bush River to seek out a new place to make their home. Samuel Kelly, the son of an immigrant from Kings County, Ireland, stood 6 feet tall and was a man of calm disposition. The other man, Abijah O'Neill, was a stout man with a fiery spirit who had been wounded during the Revolutionary War, not as a soldier, but as a prisoner who refused to provide information to the British that might lead to more bloodshed. Abijah had been nursed back to health by Anna Kelly, the sister of Samuel. Love flourished between Abijah and Anna, and they were quickly married. Soon, a deep friendship was formed between the new brothers-in-law when they moved to Bush River, South Carolina.
These two men loved each other with the love that was of Jonathan and David. Even the traits of character which seemed dissimilar served to draw them closer, and to make the one more necessary for the other.
The two friends set out for the Northwest Territory of Ohio, following a Native American pathway commonly called the Bullskin Trail. Their destination was the town of Waynesville, founded a few years earlier by Samuel Highway.
We do have to realize that there were other areas being developed at the time also. Lebanon was at the time, Dayton was in the same area, I think Centerville was too, so we were all being settled about the same time. Why Highway chose Waynesville area, I'm not quite sure. He had come from England in 1791 and actually was a surveyor for this area. So he must have liked the land. He arranged to with Judge John Cleave Sims to buy the land. And he and Smith and Baines bought 40,000 acres, which included, of course, the site of Waynesville and most of what had been Wayne Township.
Samuel and Abijah also liked the land. They purchased 3,000 acres on the east side of the Little Miami River and returned to Bush River to make preparations, including the emancipation of the slaves they already held. After setting their affairs in order, Abijah requested a certificate of membership for a new meeting to be established in the Northwest Territory. He was refused.
The expressed desire was not that of a sane man. The desire to take his family from their home and friends into the wilderness was so unreasonable as to show of itself an unbalanced mind, and the request could not be granted.
Abijah was furious. He saw through the claim at once. The Quakers were scared to give up their own slaves. He denounced the Bush River meeting in no short words and left for good for the Ohio Territory in 1799.
The journey took 5 or 6 weeks, maybe more, to move up here. They had to do all kinds of things to get across the river and up and over the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. When they got here at first, they came over the hill and heading towards Waynesville. They stopped at the top of the hill and looked down, and there was only like 10 rooftops with a couple chimneys. Mrs. O'Neill broke down and cried. She didn't like the idea of coming to this area where it was just a total wilderness at the time.
Some families from Bush River followed, including that of Samuel Kelly in 1801. The rest stayed behind. Then in 1802, Zechariah Dix, a follower of Quaker abolitionist John Woolman, traveled to Bush River, where he spoke during meeting for worship in passionate terms against the evils of slavery.
O Bush River, purge thyself. Young men, young women, to you I appeal. The great Northwest Territory lies over the mountains beyond the Ohio River. It is a wild forest, it is a wilderness, but it is a fertile land. It is a land forever dedicated to human freedom. There you can make productive fields. Shake the dust of human bondage from your feet for your own sake and for the sake of your children's children. This system of human slavery will fall.
Dix went on, predicting that the institution of slavery would not be conquered until the lands flowed with blood. It was persuasive, and the trickle of Quakers into the Northwest Territory turned into a full-fledged migration. Within 10 years, from a membership of over 100 families, only 11 members remained with the Bush River meeting. It was soon laid down.
And I might say a little bit about the testimonies, the basic testimonies of Quakers, our simplicity, and when you look at the white brick meeting house, it's very simple, very plain. They believed in simple, plain dress. Then the second testimony was integrity. They would not tell a lie. And then the next testimony was community. They believed in the community. That's where the education part kind of comes in. And then they believed in peace. And then the other testimony was the equality testimony. They were the first people to give women rights. And that was a big part of what caused the Quakers to move from South Carolina to Ohio.
The early Quaker settlers of Waynesville began to hold meeting for worship in several different homes and log cabins. By 1803, the need for a meeting house was established and some land was purchased at 4th and High Street, and a 30 by 30 foot log cabin was erected. Just 2 years later, it was already too small for the growing membership.
Quakers do things by a committee, and the clerk of the committee was John Satterthwaite.
Well, you mentioned John Satterthwaite. Of course, he was one of the biggies in Waynesville. He did build the meeting house. I think he's given credit for at least 7 or 8 of our structures.
There was several other people on the committee. Levi Cook was on the committee, one of our ancestors. There was a furnace on the committee, several other prominent people here in town.
The White Brick, as it came to be known, was a 2-story meeting house featuring a large meeting room. 3 facing benches were elevated for elders and for more prominent speakers. The rest of the benches were arranged on a slight inclined plane to allow those seated in the back a better view. A gallery loomed above the room featuring yet more benches. The construction was not without some changing elements.
When they first built the white brick, there was a lady called Charity Lynch who didn't think they ought to have a stove in the meeting house. But I always say the second year they realized this wasn't South Carolina, that the winters got pretty cold, and they put a stove in the meeting house the second year.
Like many Quaker meeting houses, shutters split the meeting house into two halves.
Both sides were the same. There was a side for women's meetings and a side for men's meetings. They would raise the shutters in the middle of the meeting house and have a meeting for worship so that everybody could be together.
As the building is over 200 years old, some things have remained the same, while others have evolved with the times.
In 1960, it was remodeled to include a first day school side where they have 3-4 classrooms upstairs. They had a little nursery downstairs, a library, plus 2 bathrooms and a cloakroom, kind of. And it worked very well until it still works well. So,
first established as a preparative meeting, the first official meeting for business of the Miami Monthly Meeting was held on the 13th day, 10th month of 1803, and has been meeting continuously since then. The initial boundaries of the meeting were set with the Ohio River to the south and the Hocking River to the east. No boundaries were set to the north or to the west. Any Quaker living within the vast section of the Northwest Territory was a member of the meeting, including Quakers from across Ohio, Indiana, and other reaches. By 1807, the meeting had over 1,500 members, and other meetings soon began to appear. West Branch in West Milton, Center Meeting in Wilmington, and Fairfield Meeting in Hillsborough. Countless other meetings now began to pop up, many tracing their roots to Miami. And so it was that the Miami Monthly Meeting became the mecca of the Quaker migration.
the friends buried people as they died. They didn't bury people in family plots. So they also used very, very simple markers. They didn't use elaborate gravestones or anything like that. So some of them were even crick rocks, and some of the people just had their initials and the year they died put on the stones.
In keeping with the testimony of simplicity, few written or photographic pieces of evidence remain of the early Quaker settlers. Most of them were more consumed with their daily labor and spiritual life rather than such things.
When I die, simply state this: Joseph Cloud is dead.
I was talking to a friend at Fall Creek meeting, and I was reminded that I had had this drawing to come to Miami meeting, and it had been with me for 2 or 3 years, but I hadn't really followed up on it. And so then I just kind of went on, and part of my experience with meetings led me to ask about the spirit of the meeting. And so then I asked to know the spirit of the meeting, and I just had the deepest sense of spirit that I have ever felt in my entire life. It was like I was in a cavern and I was walking along this path. And sometimes when you're going through a cave, you look over the edge and there's just blackness. Well, it was like that. It was so deep, I couldn't perceive the bottom. And in fact, I realized later that I had that I was actually having a fear response because of the depth of spirit. But to me, that wasn't something to keep me away. It was something that helped me to feel like this is a place that I need to come back to.
As the meeting grew, the members naturally began to interpret the practice of Quakerism in different forms. This difference of opinion spread throughout the country, resulting in numerous meetings splitting into two factions. There were the Orthodox, who interpreted the Bible with a very literal sense, and there were the followers of the Quaker Elias Hicks, better known as Hicksites, who believed less in a direct interpretation of the Bible and more in the continuing revelations of the divine spirit within every individual. In 1828, Elias Hicks spoke at the White Brick, and separation between Orthodox and Hicksite members of the meeting grew too large to continue as one meeting. So the Orthodox friends left and began to meet in the old 30-foot log cabin across the street. By 1836, they had decided to build their own meeting house.
The Orthodox friends moved into the old 30-foot by 30-foot log cabin, and that was in 1828, and by 1836 they had decided to build a brick meeting house for the Orthodox friends, which is the red brick building of today. It was very similar to the white brick, except for it was red brick.
Inside, a raised pulpit was erected for a pastor to speak from. Otherwise, Orthodox friends had a very similar meeting house to gather in for worship, directly across the street from the White Brick.
The split was very, very cordial here in Waynesville. They would trade the dishes and stuff back and forth when they had meetings, and the Orthodox and the Hicksites would both use the same thing, but it would be at different times. Some of the times when the buggies came up the hill to go to meeting for worship, some members of the family would get out of the buggy and go to the Orthodox side. Some would come to the Hicksite side. So this is one of the only places where a religious group has split and they were able to coexist directly across the street from each other. So
the Orthodox friends continued to meet at their own Miami monthly meeting in Waynesville until the 1920s, at which time their meeting was laid down. The red brick was abandoned and left in a state of disrepair until the 1940s, when the Miami Hicksites purchased the red brick and began to remodel it. The remodeled red brick now served, and continues to serve, as a social room for the meeting, featuring bathrooms and a gathering place for meals and festive occasions, along with a remodeled kitchen featuring some modern amenities.
I was raised a Presbyterian and had gone to a Quaker college in Philadelphia called Haverford. And one of the requirements was when you were a freshman at Haverford, you had to attend meeting once a week, which I did, and I became familiar with a so-called unprogrammed meeting, which is what this meeting here at Pine Valley is. And that appealed to me. There was no minister, there was no dogma, there was no protocol, and there was no scripted service. And that was an appealing aspect of religion to me. And I went to Miami meeting, which was, again, as I mentioned, an unprogrammed meeting, and was what I had seen before and attended before. So that was appealing to me because there was no interaction, no intermediary between me and my religion. It was all my interpretation of it.
The ministry of the Miami monthly meeting was deeply felt in the town of Waynesville for hundreds of years. At the same time that they were building the white brick, the Quaker settlers also constructed a schoolhouse up the street. It was an unsegregated school. Native American children could attend, as could the children of black families escaping the terrors of slavery in the South. Quakers were also active in the Underground Railroad, sheltering runaway slaves in their homes and barns. The Butterworth Farm, a Quaker homestead at the southern end of Warren County, was one of the major stops on the pathway to freedom and still stands today.
I've heard the story that the Quakers were having a meeting, and I think this is in Turtle Creek Meeting House, which was the next meeting south of here. And there was a runaway slave that was coming by, and he knocked on the door and asked them to hide him or do something to help him to avoid the bounty hunters. So he came in and he hid under one of the benches, and the lady's skirts all covered him up so that they could not see him. Well, then the bounty hunters knocked on the door and asked if any slaves had passed. And they said, no slaves have passed here. This was one of their testimonies, was the integrity testimony, so they would not tell a lie. Well, the slave had not passed. He was right there in the meeting house as they were chasing him. So,
at the close of the 19th century, many Quakers from Waynesville were traveling to the city of Philadelphia to visit and attend meetings in the eastern part of the country.
And about this time, the Quakers in Philadelphia were building boarding houses for older Quakers whose spouse had died and they didn't have family to move to and didn't have anybody to live with, so they would, to help take care of them as they aged, they built what was called a boarding house. Well, friends in Ohio and Indiana yearly meeting at that time decided that they could do the same thing. So they wondered where to put it, and they finally decided that here at Waynesville would be an ideal place to build the boarding home.
The Friends Boarding Home was constructed and completed in 1905. It featured 16 boarder rooms and served as a place for elderly Quakers to rest and live in communal harmony with others. It also served as a home for school teachers who are now teaching at the Union School across the street and at the public schools up on the hill. The boarding home served well until the late 1950s and early 60s, and then there was seen a need for something more.
And then in 1972, they saw the need for a nursing home. There was no nursing home in this part of the county or anywhere in this area. So that's when they started Quaker Heights Nursing Home.
When it was first conceived, the Quaker Heights Nursing Home contained 40 beds for the elderly. Some skeptics in town thought that it would fail, that there wouldn't be enough of a need. The 40 beds were filled within 6 weeks. Today, the nursing home features 70 beds, an assisted living wing, and a restorative care unit and rehab facility, and serves a vast portion of the Tri-County area around Waynesville, and is still run by the Friends Boarding Home of the Ohio Valley yearly meeting of the Religious Society of Friends. The Friends Boarding Home, meanwhile, underwent some difficult times of its own.
The Friends Boarding Home was built in 1905, and it has poured concrete walls, interior as well as exterior, so you can't really change the interior of the Friends Boarding Home. And by having the poured concrete walls, it doesn't have individual bathrooms for each room, so you had like community bathrooms. So this caused problems in renting the boarding home, and it was never a profitable thing after they built the nursing home. It was always losing money, and they had trouble renting out the rooms.
The Friends Home underwent many revisions in the coming years. A halfway house for patients with mental care needs, an extension of the Quaker Heights Nursing Facility, an office building for the nursing home, and then, in 1999, a new idea was proposed.
So in 1999, a group of people got together and decided to open a museum, which Waynesville didn't have, but with all the rich history that's here in Waynesville, we needed a place. So this worked out very well to become a museum for the not only Waynesville but the surrounding area, northern Warren County and the villages of Lytle, New Burlington, Corwin, and other places, Argonia even around here. So We now have all the rooms full, and we have stuff. We're having problems getting storage for all of the artifacts and things we have from the area.
Today, the museum at the Friends Home offers tours, drawing visitors from throughout the country. The museum's ghost tours are especially popular draws, regularly attended throughout the year. In the museum itself, individual rooms showcase the history of Waynesville, of the surrounding smaller villages, and even the Quaker presence in the village.
Interestingly enough, the Quakers have never been a major part of the community in terms of numbers, but they've had a major influence as of today with the entire district that we see here, including the Quaker Heights Care community, which of course is serving us even today.
In talking to some of the other members of this meeting, I've gotten a sense of history that it's not just about chronological history, but my sense was that the same spirit that was with the friends that came to this meeting is here now.
The idea of a group of people trying to focus at the same time on one thing seems to give me more strength or more ability to try to let go of many of those extraneous thoughts and try to focus inwardly on my relationship.
To me, it just gives you the strength to carry on the rest of the week. You just get energized in here. It does for me. Well, and because I've been brought here since a baby, all these people that were here before us and built us, yes.
Well, the history of my family is basically the history of the meeting. I grew up in the meeting. I was a birthright member. We had some really, really great people who sort of formed my focus on life. It's been always to be fair, to be honest, to be truthful, and to be for peace. But overall, the Quakerism is a very honest, forthright way to worship God and to become a productive member of society.
After nearly 200 years of serving the community, the Miami Monthly Meeting continues to gather every Sunday at the center of the Waynesville Quaker Historic District. There, they come together in fellowship, living out the tenets of their faith that have served and guided them for so long. Any and all visitors are welcome to attend, where they too may come together in the light.
There's a light that is shining in the heart of a man. It's the light that was shining when the world began. There's a light that is shining in the Turk and the Jew, and a light that is shining, friend, in me and in you. Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light wherever you may be. In my old leather breeches, in my shaggy, shaggy locks, I am walking in the glory of the light, said Fox. If we give you a pistol, will you fight for the Lord? But you can't kill the devil with a gun or a sword. Will you swear on the Bible? I will not, said he, for the truth is more holy than the book to me. Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light wherever you may be. In my old leather breeches and my shaggy, shaggy locks, I am walking in the glory of the light, said Fox. I am walking